As many of you have heard, FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange company founded by Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, as he's often referred to, went bankrupt when essentially a run on the exchange exposed a major liquidity crisis. Now, going bankrupt sucks, and it oftentimes happens to good people or companies who just happen upon hard times or bad luck. But that doesn't seem to be what's happened with FTX. The plot keeps getting thicker and seemingly more corrupt the more information we learn. For example, $1 to $2 billion, that's billion with a B, of customer funds are missing. Just poof, vanished from the books with no record of where the money went. Another $10 billion in customer funds were transferred to FTX's sister company, Alameda Research, which was, before it also went under, a cryptocurrency trading firm also founded by SBF. Now, apparently SBF had a bespoke software system installed that allowed for him to make secret transactions without flagging external regulators. Now that's odd. Well, bankruptcy proceedings show creditors are owed over $3 billion. 10 of them are owed at least $100 million, with the largest of the creditors being owed $226 million. And of course, the names of the creditors have been redacted, so we don't know who these firms, entities, or individuals are. But what we do know, and what's being revealed, are some of SBF's financial dealings, including massive donations to Democrats. In fact, SBF is the second largest donor to Democrats, with the exception of George Soros, with more than $460 million going in support of the Democrats in the recent midterm elections. And then there's the aid to Ukraine. In March, FTX set up a crypto donation site to help turn Bitcoin into bullets, but the website seemed off. There were some inconsistencies. First, they reported raising $70 million. Then suddenly overnight, that number went down to $60 million, where it remained for months on end. Now, all of the secrecy and inconsistencies in the reporting around FTX ties to Democrats in Ukraine is why independent media is taking a closer look. Though the mainstream media insists there's nothing to see here, and any insinuation that there's some sort of violations of U.S. federal laws being run between FTX and Democrats is just another conspiracy theory, the Gray Zone, an investigative news outlet, never fails to do its due diligence. Now, recent reporting by the Gray Zone reveals these details about the crypto company's meltdown and the connections to the Democratic establishment and Ukraine. Kit Clarenberg, an investigative journalist with the Gray Zone UK, did a deep dive into Sam Bankman-Fried's alleged connections to the Democratic Party and funding Ukraine with weapons. Kit's reporting for the Gray Zone was then subsequently censored and banned on Instagram, owned by big liberal Mark Zuckerberg. Now, Kit joins us to discuss his own reporting being censored and to sort out this crypto scandal involving some of the most powerful Democratic political players and the possible federal charges faced by SBF. Kit, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for being here. So you did a really amazing piece in the Gray Zone, read it, very long, detailed. It ended up getting censored from Instagram. I want to start off there. Why did they censor the piece?
Well, I mean, I kind of half jokingly said, but I was entirely serious as well, when news broke that it had been censored, that I'd like to thank the CIA intern who wrote that fact check for confirming the story is 100% true. Yeah, I mean, I suspect it was censored because, the kindest reading is someone read as far as the headline and assumed it was perpetuating the notion that funds raised through this mechanism called Aid for Ukraine had been funneled to Democrats. I not only didn't make this allegation, I explicitly said there was no evidence for it as yet. What I did do was I did a kind of detailed analysis of now deleted web pages related to Aid to Ukraine, dating back to April and from there throughout this year. Now, as you mentioned, it seems that initially on April 1st, when this resource has been operational for 2.5 weeks, it claimed it had raised 70 million. This was very quickly revised down to 60 million, where it has stayed ever since. So that's 10 million missing for a start, potentially. But yeah, I mean, what really struck me was as you go further, kind of closer to the present day, there was in the kind of late October, the original website for Aid for Ukraine is deleted and then replaced with another completely identical one. Quite why this happened isn't clear. There are you can have some suspicions around the timeline there. A few days earlier, the Texan financial regulators said that they were going to start investigating FTX for potentially illegal activity. If No, I mean, it seems very clear that FTX was all along some kind of front for something, which we can get into. I mean, this would no doubt the slightest inkling of regulators taking a closer look at what FTX were doing would have set off alarm bells within FTX. It likely would have done in Washington D.C. too, due to Sam Bankman-Fried's lavish political donations and ties to Democratic figures, and by extension, it may well have set off alarm bells in Ukraine too. So there's that. But what's really striking, it becomes more and more curious with every denial that's issued by a crypto bro or a Ukrainian government official who's been involved in this, is they claim that only 60 million was ever raised by Aid for Ukraine, and that they only used Sam Bankman-Fried's services to convert crypto into fiat currency in March, and that's the extent of their use of it, and they haven't fully used that 60 million total. Now, Aid for Ukraine's been accepting donations this whole time. It's been. You can even check on publicly available blockchain records. It's received millions and millions and millions of dollars. Where is this money going? Because apparently it's not being used by Aid for Ukraine. Is it being embezzled? Is it being used for black operations off books? We don't know. These are very obvious questions to answer. And yes, as you said yourself, this is a story that where the plot is thickening almost hourly. It's been revealed that hundreds of millions was spent on lavish properties in the Bahamas for Sam Bankman-Fried's parents. It's been revealed that federal prosecutors in New York were investigating FTX's business practices many months before its collapse. Why is it that only independent media is looking at the Ukraine angle when that is the most obvious kind of in plain sight aspect to this whole story? It boggles the mind, really.
Yeah, so let's go back to this website, because this is where it's really, this is where it just gets so odd. So they have this website that they launched back in March. In middle of March is when they launched this Aid for Ukraine website. Now, who owned the website?
It was an asset of the Ukrainian government's digital transformation department, which, funnily enough, played a key role in getting my friends and colleagues Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mete disinvited from a recent Web Summit event in Portugal. So yes, it was effectively originally an asset of the Ukrainian government's own website. Yet then, yes, it is spun out in late October, early November, into a standalone website. Why?
Okay, got it.
Particularly if it's apparently, why? Particularly apparent if it's apparently been not operational the whole time, and not, it seems very odd that you would do this.
Right.
And then this is days before or the FTX scandal erupts. I mean, what did Kiev know, and when did it know it? Did it see something coming?
Right, because it would be very odd to suddenly have this Ukraine government website, is what you're saying, and then suddenly it's just an independent website no longer connected to the government of Ukraine days before the scandal breaks. Right, it does definitely beg to question, why wouldn't it, was that just happenstance? Was it just, absolutely coincidental? I suppose it could have been, but it is very strange. And what also is really strange about the website is, okay, I think you could explain away, you think you raised $70 million and then you do your accounting and you say, oh, whoops, actually it was 60 million. We got the number wrong. Okay, fine. You can explain that away as well in April. But it is months past April, and this website has been operational, and they're trying to tell us that it's only raised 60 million stagnantly since April, even though the blockchain shows millions of dollars pouring in through this.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. But I mean, this is clearly a pre-agreed line that's being stuck to. I mean, again, almost every day, people involved in this operation come forward to say, "Oh, yes, we only used it in March." It's just not true, and that's really suspicious. And I mean, yes, the answer to why none of these millions that have been flowing in since then have been recorded, it might be innocent or exculpatory, although these people are just making themselves look more guilty in the process.
Right. I mean, and it could be. So, where was this money directly funneling into? So, if you made a donation to this site, did that go to FTX, and then FTX was to convert that to fiat money and send that over to Ukraine? Is that the process? So, if just as an average person, if I want to give some crypto to aid to Ukraine, what would happen from there? Do you know?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, on paper, the blockchain was it would go to FTX first, then it would be sent to the Ukrainian government, who would pass it to their finance ministry, and in turn would pass it to their Ministry of Defense. Well, and it's again been claimed by some people involved in this that the government of Ukraine did not have FTX wallets, which is to say that they did not, the money was not stored with FTX. But that's not the case for the Kiev School of Economics, which has been distributing aid in Ukraine since the very start of this conflict, and they openly advertised the fact that they have had FTX wallets, and they again claim to have raised a not insubstantial amount of money. I mean, if that's stored with FTX, has it not been lost now?
Right.
Clarity is unforthcoming on these very basic points.
Well, and the fact that FTX, what we know now is that there was this bespoke software system apparently that allowed for them to make some transactions, that allowed for Sam himself, right, to make these kind of transactions that ultimately were off the book, somehow not recorded, somehow would evade any sort of internal flagging or even an external audit. So that in and of itself right there is, why would this company need this bespoke software that would allow them to do this if you weren't trying to hide money?
Yeah, I mean, but this is the thing, is that it bears underlining everything that Sam Bankman-Fried was involved in was deeply criminal, and it's very, very clear. I mean, there was an initial filing by a court appointed CEO. He oversaw Enron's bankruptcy, and he says that based on an initial review, the finances of FTX are the most chaotic, incomplete, and frankly disturbing that he's ever seen. I mean, he oversaw the biggest fraud in US corporate history, and he's saying this is really quite extraordinary. But 134 so far separate shell companies associated with Sam Bankman-Fried have also filed for bankruptcy. I mean, no doubt, at least some of them were used for money laundering or indeed, tax evasion, embezzlement. But I mean, were there other purposes there? Again, the CIA is well known to use shell companies to mask its operations. I mean, everything about SBF and his companies is so deeply dubious. There is a narrative that's emerged that, because everyone from journalists to VC investors to major politicians bought into the SBF hype, that they were kind of blind to these issues. I don't buy that for a second. These people were creating the hype. They knew what they were doing by promoting this late 20s, 30-year-old with zero serious business acumen to these parapets of genius and tech guru status. I mean, it's what they do every time, but it does beg the question of whether he was just a front man / fall guy for something else, and whether it was allowed to operate in this kind of utterly chaotic, corrupt manner for so long without anyone asking questions. I mean, typically, that would be very difficult unless you have someone vouching for you or something.
Yeah, and I've been going down all kinds of roads with this mentally, just kind of these what ifs, and they are just speculations and what ifs. But, there are a lot of questions because there are just so many things that aren't adding up here, and so much secrecy, and where's the money, right? A lot of some questions, of course, there's the question of the money laundering, because there was no transparency with this money. Money has disappeared. And we're not even getting transparency on who the creditors were, who gave them the 100 million or the 200 million here and there. We don't even know who those people, entity, or firms were. So there's a lot of secrecy around this. But, one of my questions is, was this, so if we're going to do this what if game, was this maybe set up as an entity in order to sow distrust in crypto, right? I mean, just to get people to, oh yeah, we're buying into it. It's like, it's all worth the hype. And then suddenly it goes belly up and everybody says, oh geez, crypto doesn't work, which was a threat to fiat currency, or even saying crypto needs to be regulated, or the government needs to come up with its own crypto, right? I mean, there's now these discussions that are forming that suddenly the threat that crypto had on fiat currency is suddenly maybe not even going to be a problem anymore, because they're just going to they're going to solve those problems now because of FTX.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's an interesting theory, and I think again, there's a rather curious timeline here, where I mean, around the time that FTX starts collapsing, a trial of a digital dollar is announced, and the similar thing in the UK as well, where the governor of the Bank of England said that the collapse of FTX showed that there was a potential necessity to create a digital pound. I mean, I don't really see how that follows, but yes, it would be a very good way of discrediting the entire industry, and indeed, yes, like kind of tech pro figures who seem to dominate it, using SBF as a kind of masthead / fall guy to represent everything that's wrong with the industry.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is this, because of the layers and layers of corruption that we're now uncovering because of this, there's certainly probably not one answer. It was probably many things. It probably operated as many things depending on what the operator wanted, right? If they wanted to funnel some money from one place to another, maybe they would use FTX to do that. If they're the government and they're saying, hey, we want to start regulating crypto somehow, or we want to come out with our own crypto, or we want to take down crypto, then this was a good way to do it. I mean, it seems like if you want money as a Democratic politician, good way to get it. Go to FTX. Even outlets, right? Some news outlets were collecting money from FTX. Seems like this entity played a different role for different reasons for different people, depending on what they wanted. But what it didn't do was what it was supposed to do, seemingly, for the average customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that it seems to have its tentacles in literally everything. I mean,
Right.
it was it was just funding investigative journalists, alleged investigative journalists, to produce propaganda, supporting the notion that COVID was absolutely, definitely, not a US lab leak, but a Chinese one, and all sorts of other really rather questionable things. I mean, yes, if we take the view that it was serving different masters or different purposes, I mean, yeah, it would be a great way to tank crypto, but then all along, the Democratic Party is raking it in while they can. I mean, another curious timeline here is FTX was founded in April 2019, which is when Joe Biden announces his presidential campaign.
Right.
Sam Bankman-Fried's mother is, of course, a Democratic fundraiser of some standing, even though she does so completely in the shadows and without disclosing her involvement or who her investors are. It then starts. FTX, starts funneling tens of millions to Democratic campaigns, Democratic super PACs, Democratic candidates, and then this leads to a flurry of meetings at the start in the kind of first half of this year, where Sam Bankman-Fried attends the White House. Sometimes he has fellow FTX staff who are ex-Obama era officials, coming with him. Sometimes he's on his own. What was discussed, we don't really know. And then subsequent to this, he announces he's going to give $1 billion to the Democratic Party to ensure that they win in 2024, which is an absolutely staggering amount of money. Again, in mid-October, he rose back from this and says, "Oh, it was a dumb idea, and actually, I'm just going to give up completely on political donations." That's quite an extraordinary turnaround to go from someone who had never never been engaged in political activism or campaigning or donations to suddenly become one of the Democratic Party's biggest in history, and then suddenly give it up and get bored of it. Again, did he see clouds on the horizon? Were people behind him saying you need to be careful about making all of this noise in public because it's going to draw the attention of regulators? It's uncertain. I mean, it does seem that the newly appointed CEO is adamant to get to the bottom of this, and it is, at least in theory, not going to leave any stone unturned. But as is so often the way of these things, a fix comes in. And I think that the fact that, yes, the media is minute by minute documenting the destruction of FTX and crypto, but is ignoring this massive, very obvious elephant in the room of aid for Ukraine is very, very, very striking.
Yeah, they seem to be ignoring a lot. They seem to just be making it, this kid is now just, ran off with the money. And he's the one who, and this was all just his scam, and that's it. And there was nobody else involved. I mean, that just seems to be where they're headed with this.
It was one person's fault. Yeah.
or his girlfriend too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh God, I don't even want to think about it. But I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, he could very easily have been a patsy, and specifically chosen because he was not very intelligent and didn't really know what he was getting himself into. I mean, this is what powerful people do all the time.
Yeah, well, Kit, you've done some really great reporting on this, and
Thank you.
for Instagram, of course, to say, oh no, this was misinformation, and you're right, they didn't even read past the headline because then they fact checked, which happens all the time in these fact checks. I even had AP fact check me the other day on something, and what do they do inside the fact check? They say, well, they didn't actually say these things that we're that we're fact checking them on. But it implies, and people read these things and then they think this other stuff, and so that's why we're fact checking this, even though these people didn't actually say the thing that we're claiming that that needs to be fact checked. I mean, it's just bizarre, but great piece. Definitely recommend people read it. You could check out Kit Clarenberg's work at the Gray Zone, which is an excellent news organization. Always doing due diligence. Max and Aaron can't believe they got disinvited to the event in Portugal. I mean, but that was Ukraine's doing, right? They said we don't want them there, and they got disinvited, which is really unfortunate. So, Kit, thank you so much for joining us. And where else, so people can find you? Gray Zone, anywhere else they can look?
Yeah, like I also contribute to Mint Press and a website called The Cradle, which is great investigative journalism. Do check it out. You can find me on Twitter, and I also have a occasionally updated Substack if that's your thing. So
excellent. All right, Kit, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Take care. Thank you.